Welcome to Progress in San Diego, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I'm your host, Walter Davis, and with me I have the pleasure to have one of the people that's been working behind the camera for many, many months, and that is Abby Oberg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Walter.
And Abby is a mental health professional. I'll let you go ahead and state your credentials.
I'm a marriage and the family therapist intern, and I'm a master counselor of addiction.
So tell me, what motivated you to get involved in that particular?
Well, I come from a family of origin of alcoholics, and so I became acquainted with that lifestyle at an early age, like in the womb, and ended up marrying an alcoholic, and I was going to cure my alcoholic. So I studied everything that I could get my hands on, and ended up in therapy with a therapist that specialized in addiction, and fell in love with the whole process. And then went to Al-Anon, saved myself, and became a therapist myself.
Wow, well, that's quite a story. So that's a big time recovery for yourself, and me too. I mean, I have a history of dealing with alcoholism in the family, and I'm also a treatment specialist when it comes to addiction. So we kind of speak some of the same language. So a lot of people don't really understand what alcoholism is. You know, can you talk about that some? What is alcoholism?
Well, alcoholism is the inability to say no to the substance, quite literally. There's a study that they did that it affects the pleasure pathway, and some people are compelled to just keep ingesting alcohol. And a lot of people, my friends in particular, just want everyone to say no. Just say no. But it's just not that simple. Some people cannot say no.
Why is that? Why is it that people can't say no?
Well, it affects the pleasure pathway in the brain, and they can't. That part of the brain actually takes over the judgment portion of the brain. So they don't really, even though they're experiencing serious negative effects, they don't stop.
I see. So it's sort of a cycle of a person going up, feeling up, and then dropping down, but dropping down lower, and then wanting to get back up again. So it turns into this big cycle of trying to maintain feeling normal.
Well, with tolerance, it takes more and more of the chemical to produce the effects that they got when they first got buzzed. And so they'll keep increasing their amount to get that first high again, although they will never be able to get that high again.
So tell me some of the negative effects of alcohol in the body.
It's like a solvent. So if you ingest enough of the substance, it will strip the mucous membranes out of your intestines. It affects your organs. It can take out your heart valves. Depending on the individual, it can do some serious damage.
So the bottom line is that alcohol causes every organ in the body to do the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Instead of your kidneys expelling waste and holding on to vitamins, they expel the vitamins and hold on to the waste. Your brain doesn't function properly, so this is why people stumble, because the instructions down to their legs don't get there, and this is why they slur their speech, because the judgment center is the very first thing to go away when alcohol is consumed, and then when it, of course, proceeds back to the central nervous system, then that's when death can occur. And a hangover is a form of alcohol poisoning. A blackout is a form of alcohol poisoning. And so it's also a form of abuse. So if you ever drank to the level of having a hangover or a blackout, then you drank too much. In addition, there's something called synergy. Would you talk about synergy some?
Well, would you like to talk about synergy?
What is it? When basically...
When they combine drugs and alcohol?
Combining drugs and alcohol.
The synergistic effect?
Synergistic effect, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a serious effect. A lot of times, and what's really popular right now is ingesting the energy drinks and alcohol. So it's a stop-go effect. So they drink enough alcohol to get buzzed. They drink the energy drink to get back up again, and then they hit the alcohol again. Same with cocaine and alcohol. They will modify their reality and do the stop-go. Unfortunately, they don't last the same length of time, the effects. And so the amphetamine can actually wear off before the alcohol does. And so then they're behind the wheel falling asleep because they don't actually dissipate at the same rate. So it's a very dangerous thing to do.
Right. So, in effect, if someone takes cold medication, for example, and then drinks alcohol in the evening, they can still be impaired that following morning because of synergy. So sometimes 1 + 1 = 16 or 8 or 10, depending on a person's body fat, depending on their weight, their size, and their gender.
And since they're both central nervous system depressants, they can give up breathing.
And this can lead, of course, to death. This
That's
is why
right.
people overdose, and this is what happens in the overdose situation.
I think that's what happened to Heath Ledger. He accidentally had too many central nervous system depressants, and he stopped breathing in his sleep.
Wow. So we've lost a lot of celebrities due to drug abuse. And some people don't look at alcohol as a drug.
They don't. You can buy alcohol and diapers in the same place. They think it's safe.
And in fact, it isn't. People don't realize that alcohol is actually a waste product formed by microscopic organisms. Fungus, bacteria, and yeast are microscopic animals. And so what happens in the fermentation process is that a vegetable product is introduced to the microscopic animals. So in effect, when you're drinking wine, you're drinking grape-flavored urine from microscopic animals. Drinking tequila is the same as drinking cactus-flavored urine. Drinking rum is the same as drinking sugarcane-flavored urine. And so the waste product is ethyl alcohol from these microscopic animals. And so people don't tend to understand that alcohol is a drug. And it's amazing to me that it's even legal. But, you know, prohibition, we've tried that, right? Prohibition of alcohol didn't work.
That just went underground.
And so in the same context, prohibition against other drugs is also not working, is it not?
No, I think any time that you outlaw something, you make it extremely attractive.
So we see now more American people killed on the streets of major cities because of the drug wars than we had during the wars in the Middle East. Cities like Chicago, where you had more than 400 deaths in 1 year, where we had a total of more than 4,000 people die in the wars in the Middle East, we've had more than that die in just 1 year, right, with the drug wars. So it doesn't seem like the drug wars are working, huh?
No, it really isn't. And unfortunately, they're ending up in prison, and that doesn't work either. They're not getting treatment. They're being warehoused at our expense. It's very expensive to keep someone in prison. And I think they would be better suited to be released for treatment and actually have the opportunity to work and contribute to society rather than be warehoused.
So the other part of this is that for the same price we warehouse people in prison, we could give them job training, we could give them treatment, and actually give them a job to where they would be productive citizens. But currently what we're doing is punishing people for the rest of their lives. They never stop getting punished because once they check that box and they were previously convicted, they can't get a job. Isn't that barbaric?
Well, at least there are quite a few felony-friendly businesses now. Walmart is one, Target is one, where they can actually get jobs, but it's still a stigma, and people think twice before hiring a felon.
And those are actually not necessarily very high-paying jobs in terms of earning a living wage.
No, they're probably minimum wage.
And so, which means they may have to supplement that with additional illegal activities.
Well, the sale of drugs is a high-paying job. It's really hard to convince them to take a minimum wage job when they can make a fortune selling drugs.
So it seems like we're in a really barbaric stage in our society in terms of how we're dealing with mental illness and mental health.
Well, I think a lot of the people that turned to drugs and alcohol had underlying mental health issues. They were self-medicating to make themselves feel better. And unfortunately, they got caught up in that. You know, after a while, it quit making them feel better, but they couldn't stop.
What are some of the underlying issues that people could be found medicating?
Attention deficit. I have found that the use of methamphetamine is really beneficial if you have attention deficit. So when people say they outgrew attention deficit syndrome when they were children, didn't really outgrow it. They self-medicated it instead with stimulants. And it had the same effect, but unfortunately the methamphetamine is illegal.
Mm-hmm. What about grief? Depression?
Well, depression, unfortunately, is a byproduct of alcoholism because, and a lot of drug use, it turns off the serotonin and the dopamine in the brain. And so what they self-medicated and to make themselves feel better actually ended up making them more depressed. So it was a cycle that they didn't mean to set into motion, but once they start to spiral, they can't stop it.
So we have to be aware that the brain contains thousands of chemicals, and it also contains millions of cells. And thus, these chemicals have very specific functions in terms of what we feel emotionally. There are very specific chemicals for shame and for guilt. And some people have more or they have less than other people. This is why our behaviors are very different. So when someone drinks alcohol, a chemical is produced in the brain called tetrahydroisoquinoline, which is abbreviated TIQ. The TIQs block the receptors that allow control of mood level, learning ability, body temperature, and voluntary functions. And thus, as someone drinks, as you said, they become more depressed because alcohol is a depressant. On the other hand, when someone uses a stimulant like cocaine, it affects the transmitter part that sends chemicals over to the receiver, and thus we have the same result because when the receiver needs to receive serotonin, for example, there's none left because all of it's been squeezed out of the transmitter with the stimulant, and so the same result is arrived upon, and that is psychosis, whether someone is using a depressant or a stimulant, which is something that people don't understand. So there are many doctors on the street now pushing shopping carts. There are engineers out there pushing shopping carts, and they're homeless because they have lost their minds, essentially, or control of their emotions. So there is a negative stigma in this society about getting mental health treatment, is it not?
Oh, there is. I have a tendency to tell people in my program where I work that it's a mental health wellness visit because they're terrified, I'm going to say, that there's something mentally wrong with them. And that's not the case. I can pick out certain behaviors that are part of a package that may be depressed, it may be bipolar, but that doesn't make a person mentally ill. That means they need to have some chemical reinforcement to get their brain functioning to be normal. People are terrified that they're going to have something mentally wrong with them. You know, days of the snake pit, they come to mind.
So how can we assuage that? What are some ways in which we can help the public get around or over or through, better, this fear of receiving treatment for mental health?
Well, I think the number one thing that a therapist can do with a client is just to let them realize that the speaking out loud is what's beneficial. A good friend would be beneficial. A lot of people are so isolated from their neighbors, from their family, that they don't have that person to talk to. And so the very act of going in to see a therapist and talking about issues is really beneficial because when you spin on it in your brain, you use one set of brain patterns. When you speak it out loud, you're using a different set. So you're actually looking at your problem from two sides of your brain. So it's beneficial to be able to talk out loud to someone that doesn't have an agenda and how they want you to resolve the issue.
Could you elaborate on the sides of the brain Tell me some more about that.
Well, it's just a set of brain patterns. Our brains are plastic, and we make connections. We learn in arrears so that our past behavior guides our future expectations. And so when you use different parts of your brain, it's a pattern. You know, repeated. If you went down a path and you walk the same path all the time, the path becomes bare because you've trodden all the grasses down. Same when your brain. When you have a certain set of behaviors that you do over and over, it becomes a pattern. And so your brain just jumps to the start because it knows the pattern. It's kind of conditioned with how you're going to think and respond. So when you talk about an issue, it actually uses a different set than when you think about it internally. And it gives you an opportunity to use a different part of your brain.
I see. Do you recommend any type of mental exercises for people in terms of keeping their brain sharp? What do you have any recommendations?
Well, I know that my father is 86, and he is he's in a program where they do puzzles and different brain activities to keep those connections going. Because as you get older and you have adult onset of senility, or you have Alzheimer's, with Alzheimer's, you actually have holes that develop in your brain. But if you keep learning, your brain is able to make connections around the hole, and you can keep functioning. And so if you keep making new connections and new pathways for the information to leap, then it's beneficial. So they have him in a program. There's nothing physically wrong with him, but they have everybody of his age in a program where they're doing and learning new things.
So mental challenges can in fact stimulate and promote better mental health.
New activities. And anytime you're outside of your comfort zone, you're developing another connection.
So that means that you being on this television show and working back there as a
Yes.
director is helping your brain, right?
It's helping my brain.
So we're gonna make you one of our newest directors on our shows, and we're very proud to have you,
Well, thank you.
as a crew member, and it's good to have you on this side of the camera for a change.
Yeah, you guys make it look so easy. It's not.
Wow, I can't agree with that. It's pretty easy for me actually, but. What is your passion? What is your objective? What do you want to see happen in terms of your career or your contribution to this mental health thing? What's going on? What direction are you moving in?
Well, I like the positive aspect of everything. And so thankfully, in the 6 years I've been in the field, I have seen the drug and alcohol camp actually start to shake hands with the mental health. Before, we were two different camps. The drug and alcohol counselors thought the therapists were too fluffy, and the therapists thought the drug and alcohol counselors weren't educated enough. And so now they're actually shaking hands and combining forces to treat addiction. And I like the positive aspect. Addiction is such a negative disease. They are faced with family wrath. People don't want to hire them because they're unreliable. And so they have a lot of negative. And if you can infuse and tease out the positive aspect of the person and treat the addiction, it's far better than to give them the social stigma of being an addict or an alcoholic and then just compounding the stigma. So I like the positive aspect, positive affirmations, building the person up, because beating addiction is tough.
Now, you said that addiction is a disease, and a lot of people don't believe that addiction is a disease. They think that people have a choice. How can you define addiction as being a disease?
Oh, it's such an old argument. Everybody wants to say it's a choice, because if you had a shot glass of whiskey and you set it in front of an alcoholic and said, "There you go," the alcoholic would reach for the drink. But then you add the precursor, "Wait a minute, if you take that drink, I'm going to use this gun and blow your brains out." And the alcohol will think about it, and he won't take that drink. And so they point to that as saying, see, it's a choice. Well, it's not really a choice, because when you start to involve the portion, they call it the old brain, when you start to involve that portion that takes over the frontal cortex, where the judgment is and the reason, it's not a choice anymore, because that pleasure center governs everything. It becomes the number one, like breathing, eating, shelter. It's number one. It's in the number one slot. So it's no longer a choice.
I see.
They have studies where they have shown rats will push a lever to stimulate the pleasure center of their brains. They won't eat, they won't drink, and they will actually die pushing the lever.
So that's what a lot of our humans do.
That's it.
They die pushing the lever in the bar and going to the liquor store. And some of the poor areas or the lower income areas of our cities, we have a lot of liquor stores. There's liquor stores in every other corner, but we don't see the same thing happening in the more affluent neighborhoods. We don't see the liquor stores like we do in the poor
Mad
areas.
Dog, the cheap Ripple. Yeah, they do market it to specific locations. They now have a vodka, I believe, that's come out that's called the Red Label, which they are promoting down where the Crips are. And they expect to have gang affiliation, grab onto this label. And, it's a horrible marketing ploy, and they're having difficulty getting the liquor stores to buy into it, not because they don't think it will sell, but because they don't want to invite the gang into their liquor store because it's dangerous. So, they see the money behind it, but they're afraid of the liability of having the gangs be involved in their establishment. That's the only thing that's stopping it.
Very, very treacherous planning. Now, when I first began working in this field, there were about 25,000 Americans being killed every year due to impaired drivers. What's that number like now? Do you have an idea?
Oh, I have no idea of the number. Mm-hmm. I know that there's 4 DUI programs in the county. Mm-hmm. We have about 2,500 at San Diego State University Foundation through their DUI program, and it's comparable in the others. So when you think of those numbers, 2,500 times 4, it's astronomical. What is the odds that you're going to be driving on the road without someone impaired next to you in a fast lane?
Well, I have looked at the figures on the MAD website, which indicate that the figure is right about 17,000 American citizens being killed by impaired drivers every year now. And San Diego County has more than 2,000 DUI convictions every single month. And Los Angeles County has more than 20,000 DUI convictions every single month. And the sad thing is that we've lost more Americans on our roads due to impaired drivers since 1912 than we have in all of the wars combined together. There have been more than 1.8 American citizens, 1.8 million American citizens killed on the road since they began keeping records in 1912 regarding deaths by impaired drivers. So this is an epidemic problem that we're having throughout our country. Alcohol kills more than 100,000 people in this country every single year. Tobacco, more than 400,000 American citizens lose their lives due to using tobacco products. So we were having a discussion earlier about decriminalization of some of these drugs. Tell me about your feelings regarding decriminalization.
Well, I'm not sure that decriminalization is actually going to work, but I know that putting them in prison is not working either. So I think that rather than, it should be against the law because they're playing with fire. You never know when you pick up that drug if it's going to be one that you're going to be able to put down. Mm-hmm. That being said, sending them to prison isn't working. Our prisons are overcrowded as it is. Mm-hmm. We're paying a fortune to house them when we could rehabilitate them and have them be productive citizens. Mm-hmm. I actually had a participant tell me at one point that he missed prison because he had an opportunity to do a lot of reading. You know, I think there's something wrong with an able-bodied man being warehoused where he can read rather than receive treatment and actually join the workforce.
So you support treatment as opposed to incarceration?
I do.
And so the reason they're being incarcerated is because it's criminalized to possess the drug.
The three-strike law is incredible. It's
exactly.
really compounded the prisons, and thank God they are actually limiting the amount of marijuana shops now. You know, go to the doctor, get a card that you have anxiety, you can go shop for marijuana. It's now legal. That was a tremendous problem. It had a lot of implications in the DUI, because driving under the influence of marijuana is still a DUI, driving under the influence. People don't realize that. They think it's only alcohol.
But you can actually get a DUI for being too sleepy. You can get a DUI for riding a skateboard under the influence, for riding a horse, driving a boat,
Yep.
Using cold medications.
All you have to look is impaired, and you can be arrested.
Well, Abby, I really want to thank you for the interview. The time
thank
is
you,
over just so
Walter.
quickly. See how quick that was
It
over?
did go well.
See? Thank you very much for joining us. And please tell your friends about our show and come back and visit us for next week. And we're going to continue this conversation in future months. I want to thank you all very much for joining us here on Progress in San Diego. My name is Walter Davis, and thank you very much.
Hey, that was horrible. Oh, my God.